From Loneliness to Social Competence, written and narrated by the Almighty Lewis. Introduction. If you're reading this book, I'm going to assume you're living a life of loneliness. I'm also going to assume that it doesn't feel very pleasant being lonely and you want to change that. If this is you, let me tell you that I empathize with you 100%. I know what it's like to be there. You feel like you're different than the rest. To some degree, you might feel smarter and better in so many ways that people could never understand. There may even be a part of you who is resisting to interact with others simply because you feel like you're already great on your own. These and many more feelings may be crossing your heart on a daily basis, and the one question you may be asking yourself is, until when? Until when will I have to continue being on my own? If you may not have already noticed, we live in a social world. The majority of our population loves to interact with one another, and that's how we get ahead. You might want to get ahead yourself, but as you may have already noticed, you can only go so far when you're feeling lonely. This is the problem I want to tackle in this book. I want to help you become a social individual who has a choice. I will teach you how to be out there more and not abandon who you are at the core. First thing you must learn is how to embrace your loneliness from a place of inspiration. You see, right now you're lonely from a place of desperation. This might not be apparent to you, but the truth is, deep down, you don't enjoy being lonely. If you're honest with yourself, you know you want to be out there, interacting with the world, making friends, building relationships, being not only with your real self, but your best self. You're scared of rejection. You're scared of getting hurt by others, or perhaps you don't understand the mechanics of communication. It could also be that you're an introvert and you genuinely enjoy being lonely, but not always. You see, there's things in this world that you will never have or experience if you don't step out of your bubble and become a more social person. Humans weren't meant to have a balanced life. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you have to get out there and handle things on your own, but there are times when you don't. Asking for help isn't a bad thing. Being lonely creates a comfort zone in you, and within time, that becomes your reality. Next thing you know, you're in this duel between people who are lonely and those who work as a team. It doesn't have to be this way. At least not yet. Not until you've experienced both and make that choice from a place of inspiration and not desperation. I'm going to tell you right now, every choice made by desperation is a bad one. I get it. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but it doesn't have to be for long. Any choice made out of desperation is made through fear. I want you to live and make choices from a place of inspiration. Live from a place of happiness. The reason I wrote this book is because not a lot of people tackle this problem of being lonely. Almost every instructor out there has a very generic approach, or they lack the empathy of being in your shoes. They don't quite understand what it's like to be in a place of loneliness. They forgot or never knew what it was like to confront those demons all on your own. I know exactly what it's like to face these demons. I know what it's like to be betrayed and screwed over by your best friend. I know what it's like to have more awareness than the people who surround you. I know what it's like to want to talk to that person, but being fearful of getting hurt or rejected. I know what it's like to be you, and I spent years being in that place. Now I live a balanced life. I can choose to be alone and when to interact with others because I learned to embrace my loneliness and see it as a gift. I open my mind to what it's like to interact with others. The final question is, are you ready to open your mind? Are you ready to change your life? Are you ready to interact with the world? I hope you are, because this book is about to get very interesting. Chapter 1. Friendship is overrated. You hear a lot that having friends is amazing. Some people even go to such lengths of measuring your value based on the quality and number of friends you have. Just to be clear, having friends is great. They can definitely add value to your life and also help you learn a lot about yourself. However, the reason why I think friendship is overrated is because a lot of people who have a lot of good friends make you believe that you need friends. The reality is you don't need friends, at least not in the way you think. If you want to get ahead in life, what you need are allies, not friendship. You see, a friendship provides a value in of itself that most people fail to recognize and appreciate. There's even people who have friends and struggle to keep them. Want to know why? Well, someone who can communicate well usually takes friendship for granted because they know they can easily get them. These people never had to work hard to get a friend. Because of this, they never really get to appreciate what a friend is there for. Now, if you're someone who is lonely, you know what it's like to not have one. They also know the loss of one and can appreciate the hard work it takes to maintain one. Now, if you're someone who is lonely, you know what it's like to not have one. You also know the loss of one and can appreciate the hard work it takes to maintain one. So think about it. You have a major advantage right now given the fact that you may have a few friends or perhaps no friends. This is actually good. You shouldn't have too many friends. Around 3 to 5 good friends just suffice because building and maintaining a friendship is a lot of work. You have to invest time in them, communicate with them, live experiences with them, and so much more. You can't possibly have 10 or more to do that because they will take a large portion of your time. Something to understand about yourself is that your growth is far more valuable than any relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. Never invest more time in them than you do on yourself. That's why it's far more convenient to have little friends. That way you can actually devote a reasonable time to the growth of those friendships. Let's talk about allies for a second. Allies are different than friends because allies provide you with resources. These resources can be beneficial to your growth. Your teacher at school can be an ally to help you advance in school. Your boss can also be your ally if you're looking to climb the corporate ladder and have a better position in the company. You see, these people are not your friends, however, they do add value to your life. These people are great to have in your life, but don't get them confused. Lastly, I want to talk about the psychology of friendships. Friendships should be based on an extension of you. This means that they're not there to make you feel better or do things for you. Even though they will do that at times, that's not their main purpose. Their main purpose is to push you to become better and support you in times of struggle. Your friends should be encouraging, they should be on a similar path as you are, and they must share the same core values as you do. They can be different in some aspects, but in the end, they should share your core values because those really matter. If one of your core values is hard work, your friends better be hard workers. Never force a relationship to happen, even if they seem to share the same core values. Friendships have to happen naturally. So how do you get friends? Well, given the fact that you spend so much time being lonely, you've certainly had time to know yourself. Don't worry if you don't know yourself too well just yet, because I will teach you how to figure it out in an upcoming chapter. Back to the topic, getting friends is fairly simple. Just be yourself and proactively let people know who you are. It's not enough to be yourself and not show it. You have to show it. That way your potential friends are drawn to you and not the other way around. This is how natural friendship looks like. Now, if you happen to see someone who shares the same core values as you do, by all means approach them and say something to them. You don't always have to wait, but always make sure you share the same core values. They are your guidance and a perfect way to avoid potential harmful friendships. Chapter 2. Self-reflection beats a therapist. Being lonely forces you to be with your thoughts like never before. This may seem like a curse at times if those thoughts are negative, but the reality is, having those thoughts is natural. Here's one thing you should know about your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. As someone who is feeling lonely, you are more exposed to these type of thoughts because you're in a mindset of you against the world. You think that nobody cares about you and the people who you care about don't really care about you the same way. Just know one thing very clear. Whatever it is you're thinking, that is not you. As humans, we have the ability to have thoughts and take action that's completely disproportionate to those thoughts. This means that we always have a choice to do what we ultimately think is best for us. Knowing this, while those thoughts you're having may be negative, it doesn't mean you're an evil or negative person by definition. All this means is that perhaps you're going through a rough time and those negative thoughts find it easy to make their way into your mind. It could also be that some external influence is fabricating those thoughts. Whatever the case may be, the one thing to know about thoughts is that the more you resist them, the more they will persist. No matter how hard you try, negative thoughts are going nowhere. I have them, you have them, and every human on this planet has. The difference is that some people choose to take the opposite path of those thoughts. For example, positive people constantly have negative thoughts, but they choose to take positive action anyway and accept the fact that those negative thoughts are there. These people recognize that they are not their thoughts, but rather they choose to be who they want purely on action, not thought. So now that you have this knowledge on thoughts, how do you go about them as a lonely individual? The first thing you must do is not resist these thoughts. As cruel as they are, as evil as they are, never reject them. Believe me, I've had some pretty gruesome thoughts cross my mind and I used to feel bad for having them. It was until I decided these were natural thoughts that I realized I wasn't actually an evil person. I was just exposed to negative influence that was producing these thoughts. So accept them. That is the first step. Let them be, appreciate them, and feel honored that you have the ability to connect deeply with your thoughts because I'm about to show you how to self-reflect through these thoughts. Like I said previously, negative thoughts are influenced by something or someone. Those thoughts don't get into your head by accident, and that's the key. The next step I want you to do is find the source of this negative thought. Let's say you're having this thought of wanting to hurt someone emotionally. Ask yourself logically, why do you want to hurt this person? Did they do anything to you? Don't think about this emotionally. Remember, focus on the logical. What makes it right for you to want to hurt this person? If you did this right, most likely they haven't done a thing to you, or perhaps they have, But do they really have to be hurt for it? Here's the thing. The underlying issue you're struggling with is forgiveness. Due to your inability to forgive, your emotional response becomes vengeance by default. This is only one example of how your thoughts trick you into thinking that what you're thinking is really the solution to the problem. The only way you'll get to the solution is if you come into acceptance with those negative thoughts from a place of logic. Remember that you are not your thoughts. Your ability to have thoughts and think is beautiful because it helps you know yourself. From now on, stop taking your thoughts for granted. Treat them as the beginning of something much deeper. Don't be afraid to face those thoughts and be with them. They are there as a signal that there is a core problem for you to solve, just like the example I provided. In that case, you will now have to look into forgiveness and learn how to do it. Once you learn how to forgive, I can promise you that those thoughts will diminish drastically, but you need to be brave enough to face those thoughts which seem scary at first, but they're really there to assist you. As the name of this chapter implies, once you get comfortable doing this, there's no need for a therapist, as their job is basically to do this exact process. Chapter 3. The internet has replaced humans. Gone are the days when you had to ask someone for information. Well, in some instances you still do, but now you can find a lot of knowledge online. I mean, you're listening to this audiobook because you found it online. The internet has become a blessing in magnitudes because it has given us the ability to connect with others without actually having to be with them in person. I do recognize there is a bit of shaming out there for these individuals who prefer to connect online, so allow me to clarify it for you. First of all, people who stubbornly prefer to connect in person rather than the internet are ignorant, or they plain out don't know how to use the internet. You see, both methods are great for communication and knowledge seeking. It is true that back in the day you had to know how to talk and make connections with people because that was the only way you would be able to get smarter and get ahead in life pretty much. However, times change. We no longer live in that era, and we should be proud to live in this one. We now have access to tons of information in only a matter of seconds. Here's the deal. As a lonely person, you might have gotten addicted to surfing the web and going to the internet every time you had a problem. Let me tell you that if you're this type of person, you've done a great job. Let's be honest. When you surf the internet for information, you have a wide array of sources to get your information from. Most of that information can be verified for its legitimacy, which means that you no longer have to be running around trying to find a reliable person that has reliable information. This is great, and it's an example of how useful and powerful the internet can be, and that brings me to the first issue of the internet. While the internet is great and all, it's also separating us as a society because the reasons for people to communicate in person are lowering. As opposed to before, when you had to communicate with someone to exchange knowledge, now you can just look it up online. If you want to play popular games like Uno or Jenga, you no longer have to play with someone else in person, as those games and many more have moved to an online platform. It's more convenient and less energy draining. Now, if there's something you need to tell another person, you can just send them a DM or WhatsApp message. If someone wants to know what you've been up to, they no longer have to ask you because they can just look at your Instagram profile. Another change the internet has created is it's giving people knowledge and awareness that can massively separate you from the human world. These are just a few examples of how human interaction has been affected by the internet. Now, don't get me wrong. I think these options give us an option to be more independent as opposed to relying on someone to show up to play games with you or tell you about what they've been up to. You can know all that in a matter of seconds. So like I said, if you're lonely, you might have gotten addicted to the internet for some time already. You may see it as your unconditional friend. However, it is not. As powerful and useful as it is, at the end of the day, it is just a tool. It is not and will never replace a real person. The thing about people is that they're not perfect. The internet may seem perfect compared to people, but the beauty is in that. Imperfect humans are what makes us unique. As opposed to the internet where you can expect accurate results, humans are more spontaneous. You never know what could come out of a conversation. Perhaps a new idea, a new way of doing things, a new way to see life, a new way to see the world. An in-person connection can boost your energy, it can stretch your mind, and it can bring your focus to the present moment rather than always being in your head. Not to mention all the experiences that can happen in person that will never happen through the internet. The number one flaw humans have is that they will always be unpredictable, while the internet will never be. The internet can act on its own. It needs your input in order for it to produce a result, so in essence, it puts you in control. With people, you can't do that. You can't control people, for the most part. And that's the beautiful part about it. I know it feels great to have the internet at your disposal, as long as you pay your internet bill, of course, but it's not a real person. Yes, people can be complicated and hard to get along with, but so are you, my friend. Don't give your back to your own kind for something that was created by humans. You may think that you're unique and that you're different, and you are, but you're also just like the rest of us, human. Yes, the people around you may not be up to your level of awareness, and that's okay. You don't have to force human interaction. Simply move on and find other human beings who share the same level of awareness and knowledge. Chapter 4. The Jack of All Trades. Being the jack of all trades is highly criticized because it implies that you never become a master of anything and just average at everything. Here's the thing though. If you're someone who feels lonely all the time, you've probably had to rely on yourself to do everything. I know I had to because I wanted to avoid human contact as much as possible. Should you feel guilty or bad about this? Of course not. Being a jack of all trades is freaking amazing. Of course, it may not be such a good idea in the business world because in that instance, people would rather pay the master than the average person. However, if you have been self-educating yourself on how to do certain things, by all means, don't stop. This skill is highly precious and it proves that you're capable of independence and self-reliance. Now, I will say it does take a toll on your life, and that is your ability to delegate and work as a team. Now, I understand that you may be thinking that you don't need a team and that figuring it out on your own is the way to go. But let me tell you something. If you're reading this, that means you're willing to change, or at least are open to the idea of change. Working as a team is an amazing feeling when you see it from a place of offering value. Your skill of being a jack of all trades can inspire so many people, believe it or not. Most people who don't feel lonely are always asking people for help. They're always looking to be part of a team because they don't have the courage to figure it out on their own. It takes courage, it takes will, it takes motivation to take on the responsibility and figure things out on your own without any help. You may be doing this out of necessity and be thinking to yourself that you're not motivated, but the truth is you are. You're motivated by desperation, as I explained in the introduction of the book. You feel like you don't have a choice right now, either because you don't trust humans or you don't like humans altogether. Let me remind you that you are human as well, and giving your back on your own kind isn't an idea or thought that you came up with. As said previously, you were most likely influenced by a person or an experience that led you to separate yourself from humankind. Humans were always meant to stick together as a race, but not everyone seems to understand that. Going back to the topic though, being a jack of all trades is great for producing results. You can accomplish so much on your own, but you will never achieve big things by yourself. You need a team. I'm sure that if you're reading this book, you want something more than just spending your life on your own. You want to make an impact, and you know you're going to have to gain allies, make friends, establish relationships, and interact with humans in order to get there. I'm not asking you to stop being the jack of all trades because believe me, it's a fantastic skill that I still use to this day, but I also recognize that I can't do it all on my own because we're all born with different passions and a different set of abilities. There's people out there who not only can do 100 times better, there's people out there who not only can do what you do 100 times better, but they can also do it with far more passion than you can. Same goes for you. You have a set of abilities and passions that you stand out in, and those are the ones you want to focus on while your friends and allies take care of the rest. That's how you work as a team. I know you may feel the urge to be in control and always do things yourself. Believe me, at first it will feel uncomfortable to work with others and trust them, but with time you will feel the difference. You can still continue doing things all on your own while it's still manageable, but always be open to be part of a team in order to ensure efficiency and save time. Don't be stubborn about this. Remember, if you've been hurt, practice forgiveness. If you struggle with forgiveness, I have a chapter later in this book that will help you to be more forgiving in your life. Again, being a jack of all trades is a blessing, not a curse, but it should only be done under reason. Be a leader and make the call that seems right under the appropriate situations. Chapter 5. Self-love matters more than loving others. As someone who spends his time being lonely, you may have realized that love is more centered around yourself than loving others. This is great, and I'm not out here to tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. However, society seems to disagree with this. Society loves to praise those who love others and those who sacrifice themselves for others. How in the world are you supposed to express love for others and sacrifice yourself for others if you aren't willing to do it for yourself first? Society preaches that the strongest should stand up for the weak, love the weak, and help them rise. I don't have a problem with this, but this should only happen after you're able to stand up for yourself. Once you learn how to love yourself, only then should you consider expressing love for others. Until then, you should not be making any effort in trying to love others if you can't love yourself first. People can call it selfish and egoistic, but that would be an emotional argument because it has no logic. Knowing this, how do you actually love yourself? Being in a place of loneliness may put you in a position where love seems like this strange thing that is out there, but you don't quite understand it or may know it and feel it, but only towards yourself. You see, loving yourself is about accepting yourself. You have to understand that all of us are different and that we all see and react to the world differently depending on the circumstances under which we were born and what we've experienced. Nobody else has gone through the exact same story as you have. They may come close, but never identical. Knowing this, as children we grow up, experience life, and as the years go by, we eventually develop a consciousness. In that moment, we realize how different we all are and we begin to question ourselves, why am I different? Chances are, if you feel lonely right now, it's because you saw it as something wrong to be different and you set yourself on a quest to silence who you really are to try to be like the rest. This leads us to abandon who we are as a person, which is detrimental because when we are not ourselves, we attract the wrong people into our life, which eventually leads us to becoming lonely. When we end up lonely, it's very common to get depressed and feel lonely. You may be thinking, I don't feel depressed. I feel great. Well, here's the thing. You may have never noticed how this happened as a kid or even when you were a teenager. Since you've been in that place for so long, it doesn't feel like depression anymore, at least not all the time. I will go deeper into depression in a later chapter, but for now, just understand how at some point in your life, you let go of putting your real self out there because you weren't like the rest. Now you backwards rationalize and tell yourself it's okay to be lonely, but deep down, there's an underlying fear that others will judge you for who you are. Truth is, this is inevitable. You may be thinking that only lonely people get judged, but the reality is, everyone gets judged. No one is free from judgment. There's no point in hiding and being lonely because of this fear. Either way, you will get judged. So how do you go about this? Simple. Like I said previously, acceptance and forgiveness. Loving yourself requires for you to be yourself right now. Sure, as your life progresses, you will change. But right now, you have to accept yourself for who you are, even if you don't like how your life currently looks like right now. The reality is, there is no right or wrong way to live. There's only one way of living life, and that is to live life the way you see it. When you love yourself, you come to a point where you accept that not only are you different, but so is everyone else, and that's okay. You don't need to change for everyone, and no one should change for you. This is important because you don't want to be that individual that goes out there and tries to impose their real self and purposefully hurts others who think differently. Yes, you shouldn't care about what others think about your view on life, but that doesn't mean everyone should see it the way you do. Show empathy and respect towards everyone. This means that you understand the beauty of people seeing the world a different way. Obviously, you can still choose who you have in your life moving forward. Everyone goes through a similar journey, even people who aren't lonely. Loving yourself is tough, but it's liberating. If you still choose to be lonely after this, that is a choice you can make, but from a place of inspiration, because like the title of this chapter implies, loving yourself matters a lot more than loving others. You can choose to love others once you love yourself with all your flaws and mistakes. Until then, practice loving yourself to the highest levels first. Chapter 6. Rejection is nothing but indifference. Rejection can be very painful depending on your age and who it's coming from. At a much younger age, you're more prone to be completely destroyed internally if you receive any sort of rejection. However, as you grow older, the concern is now the person who is rejecting you or the circumstance under which you're being rejected. Rejection can come from potential friends, potential romantic partners, instructors, or even your family. No matter where the rejection comes from, if the circumstance or the person means a lot to you, it will hurt. This pain can lead to a lonely life in which you no longer want to go out and put yourself on the line because you know there is a risk of being rejected and submitting yourself to a dreadful pain. With good reason, this projection is plausible as the risk of getting rejected will always be present no matter how good of a person you are or how good are you at what you do. In the end, people will reject you as a person or they'll reject your performance. At least that's what it seems like at first. Here's something to note about rejection. When someone rejects you, let's say it's a potential friend, for example, when they reject you, what they're really trying to tell you is that they think you're not the right fit for their life. I say think because they may be right or wrong depending on how well they know themselves, because the only reason you would reject someone as a person is because you know your core values. Now that you know they're only telling you you're not the right fit, what's next? Well, they may be right, and if you're not the right fit after all, the right move will be to move on. There's no reason to force a relationship like I said previously. Now, let's say your coach rejects your performance or something that you did or created. Well, as you can notice, they're not rejecting you as a person, but rather something that came from you. This is pretty common with projects, team tryouts, or any form of submitted work. If you're being rejected for one of these reasons, it could be that you need to improve, or maybe not. In order to take such rejection seriously, verify the source it's coming from. If the person rejecting you clearly knows what they're doing, then take their rejection as a sign that you can do better. But if you're being rejected by someone who isn't very qualified, then don't even bother paying attention to them. Now that you understand rejection, how do you embrace it? Well, like I said earlier, rejection is inevitable. You can't please everyone and make everyone happy, and nor do you want to try. Remember, you always want to focus on being yourself. Accept that rejection is part of life, but more importantly, you have to let go of all rejection you've been holding on to. I'm sure you've got a couple of rejections under your belt that bother you every time you think about them. I want you to proactively go back to those rejections in your memory and break them down. Analyze and see if the rejection was actually valid. Perhaps a potential romantic partner rejected you. I know I was, and plenty of times. I had to go back to each of those individually, and then I realized how much of a bad match we actually were at the time, and I'm thankful I got rejected, because if not, I would have had a breakup down the line. See the positives in your rejections. Perhaps you got rejected in a team tryout, or you got rejected at a job interview. Those rejections might have led you to train harder or upgrade your skills. It could also be that you stagnated and did nothing after those rejections because you became fearful or angry at the fact. Let it go. Rejections are part of life. They are not going nowhere. Think about it. Are you seriously going to let the rejections of other people stop you from taking the next step or giving it another shot? Don't let that be you. Loneliness and time aren't going to heal those rejections. However, more action and more options will. Sometimes it's not really about being good enough or not having the necessary skills. Sometimes it's just that you don't have enough options. You have to expand your number of options. That way, if you get rejected in one place, you have another to go to. In the end, rejection is part of life. It's wired into human beings to reject, and with good reason. Not everyone is meant to get along, and not everyone is meant to be part of everything. Don't let rejection consume you. Instead, take action, increase your options, and be yourself. Chapter 7. When being social becomes a painful experience. Social pain, which is very similar to rejection, is inevitable. There's no way around social pain once you become social. Normally, pain comes in two forms: physical pain and emotional pain. As someone who feels lonely, you might feel both pains on a daily basis, but so do the people who spend their life being social. So to say that you'd rather be lonely as opposed to being social due to social pain is delusional. So I want to warn you, as you begin your journey of trying to interact with people, you will realize that a lot of social pain is involved. How badly you're affected by social pain will highly depend on who you are. Let's go over a few social pains you'll face as you begin your journey. Some of these social pains might seem familiar to you, while others maybe not so much. Let's say in the past you tried to be social in school and you wanted to connect with a couple of strangers. So you approach them and all you get in return is ignorance. This is called social rejection, and it could become a really big deal in the long run if not treated properly. The repercussions of being socially rejected and not having no one to talk to could lead to the idea that it's better to be alone than being socially rejected. This social pain is pretty harsh, believe me, I know, but the best way to deal with it is by realizing that social rejection is pretty common and it isn't always your fault. Sometimes people are just scared to talk, like you are right now, so they find it easier to just reject you instead of telling you the truth. Another reason could be the other person's instinct and they're not feeling your vibe. This isn't a bad thing entirely, it just means that the other person doesn't find you as a match for their friendly circle. It could also be that the other person is in a bad mood and they just want to socialize. There's also those instances where the person struggles to be vulnerable and show empathy right from the start. These and other reasons could be the cause of you getting socially rejected. Another social pain you can face is betrayal. Ever had that friend, instructor, family member, or romantic partner you trusted with everything you got only to be betrayed somewhere down the line? The betrayal of someone you care about can lead to loneliness, as you will find it hard to trust anyone else in the future. I'm sorry to say this to you, but if you're betrayed by someone you love, there's no one to blame but yourself. This isn't a book about communication, but I would highly encourage you to do your research on how to qualify a trustworthy individual into your life. There's a series of steps you must take to ensure that this is the right person to trust. However, let's say you got betrayed or you feel you will in the future. Just know this, it happens. But like I said in the internet chapter, people aren't spontaneous and they constantly change. You never really know for sure what people will do next, so while they may be trustworthy at first, they may change later down the line, and that is okay. Just know that betrayal is inevitable, and the best thing you can do is fix the problem this betrayal caused and cut the relationship for good. Second chances should not be given under these circumstances, because if you're betrayed, that implies this other person acted based on emotions, not on logic, and they do not respect you. Which means that if they really are sorry, when things get hard and get emotional again, you best bet they'll consider betraying you again, especially since you forgave them once. Another social pain you may face in your social life is the loss of a loved one. Again, this is one of those things that is inevitable, as all social pain is. Yes, if you end up creating great connections and forming amazing relationships, you may end up losing a few here and there. Now, by loss, I mean they cut you from their life, they break up with you, they disappear, they ghost you, or they plain out die. The end of some of these social bonds can and won't happen all the time. Here's the thing about this. Yes, it hurts, but it's not the end of your social life. Something that hasn't died yet or gone away is your ability to form new relationships, and that's the beauty of it. No one is indispensable in this world as much as it seems like it. So there you have it. These are a few social pains you will encounter, and as you can see, most of them are really out of your control. The last thing I want you to take from this is that social pain is emotional pain that has a solution. Social pain is not permanent. Don't let any social pain stop you from being social again or start being social. Chapter 8. Dealing with the sunk cost fallacy. Ever invested time, energy, and resources into someone you were expecting something in return from, but in the end, that something never came? I know I have, and maybe you have as well, or are fearful about it happening to you. Believe me, it sucks. This can happen with a family member like your mom. In such case, you want your mom to love you, so in exchange you behave at your best, you try to help her in everything, you take care of her needs, and in the end, she still doesn't love you. How about as a guy, you're trying to impress that one girl, so you take her out on a date, you buy her flowers, you pay for the food, you make sure she's comfortable throughout the date, you guys share dessert, and in the end she tells you, thanks, it was fun, but I'm not interested. That burns, I know. Last example could be at work. Let's say you're trying to climb the corporate ladder and get a better position in the company. Your plan ultimately becomes to work harder, stay at work harder, and just do more than the rest. But in the end, you get nothing. No promotion or a better position. These examples are just a few ways that people can make you feel like no matter how much you do, you'll always go unnoticed. The first thing I want to clarify is that everything we do should have a purpose. There's people out there who say you should do things without reason and expect nothing in return. That is some bullshit. With everything you do, you should be expecting something in return, even if it's not immediate. Any logical investment should be made with intention. Never do anything without expecting anything because you will get nothing, or maybe you do, but you won't be able to capitalize on it. Don't be like that. There is always a reason why we do the things we do, even if we're not aware of it. Make sure you're very clear about why you're doing it, because that is the only way to maximize your chances of getting it. The reason why you invest in something and someone and not get what you want is because you weren't specific about what you wanted in the first place. If your reason is bland and generic, you'll most likely waste your time, blame yourself, and think no one can appreciate you, so you opt to be lonely instead. If this is you, get specific right now. Let's take the example above about the guy trying to get the girl. The reason he didn't get the girl to be interested in him long term was because his intention wasn't there. It was vague, and he was probably going about the day without a sense of direction and hopeful for the best to happen. Now, let's say he had a specific goal instead. Instead of just having the date be the goal, how about having the girl respond positively to a second date be the goal? That would have changed the dynamic of the entire conversation and all the actions. You can't be passive when it comes to getting what you want from people. You have to be specific and clear. If you have been in this position before and you can't seem to get over it, here are some things you can do. First, realize that you were being passive and you mistakenly assumed that the other person will know your intentions. Note, this is not the case for everyone. Some people can predict what you want based on previous experiences they might have had, or they can empathize by being in the same position you are. Regardless, you can't depend on these people to just know. That's not how it happens. Instead, you want to clearly state what you want and then take the necessary steps to ensure it happens the way you want it, or at the very least, it's pretty near what you want it. Again, this is what we call the sunk cost fallacy. If you've been through this, you might find it hard to invest again because, like I said, it could be hard work that never pays off. Here's the thing though, it does pay off because hard work never goes in vain if you're able to repurpose that hard work. In the example of the guy going on the date, maybe the date ended in nothing, but at least he went through the date, and the second time he'll be more prepared and less nervous. Action is never in vain. You've done a great job for at least investing in people, as most people don't even do that. If you haven't invested yet, you're not too late. Lastly, I want you to know that even in spite of being very specific with your goals in the social world, sometimes people will still not do what you expect from them. This is inevitable and it's likely to happen to you at some point. Don't be discouraged and don't get stuck. If someone just isn't appreciating you, go with someone else. Insist, but only to the degree that you're still yourself. After that, move on. Never change who you are just to get something out of someone. Chapter 9. Women aren't always right. This chapter is mainly for men, so if you're a lady, you might find the following information somewhat unrelatable. However, ladies, if you still want to listen, feel free to do so. My fellow men, in case you haven't realized yet, women tend to be far better social than us men. This is even more apparent when you're lonely. You notice how much they talk, and it might even sound annoying or lovely depending on how you see these specific women. An apparent issue that comes around with women and their talking is their immediate judgment on your character. You see, women are great at articulating drama, and they won't have a problem forming one around you if they really want to. The thing to know about this drama is that for the most part it's not real. Most of it is just opinions and thoughts about you that are based on their own emotions. This means that if they're having a good day, you're most likely to receive some praise, but if they're having a bad day, then it might be somewhere around the negative lines. Regardless, they are both a lie. If you believe what these women say, you're either going to believe you're an amazing person or you're going to believe the opposite. Either is bad because you're basing your sense of self on a woman. Women believe to their core they know everything about you. But the truth is they never will because they are women, not men. Now, this isn't to bash women or say they are all like this, but due to the feminist movement being stronger than ever these days, most women believe they can step into men's territory and claim the same authority as men, but the reality is far from that. Your best belief is to not believe them and always, I repeat, always question what they say. Now, let's say you believe something negative they said about you and now you think of yourself as a bad person. This can lead you to become lonely due to the certainty from which they speak and the social reinforcement they get. That's why I'm here, to help you break this all down. First, do note that not all women do this with the intention of hurting you or putting you down. Some women literally have fun creating this drama and that's why they do it, for their own entertainment. Yes, it's kind of unfair and cruel if you ask me, but the best thing you can do is understand this and treat their drama as it is. A joke. Only people who specialize in psychology can express empathy for you, have the necessary skills, and the will to point out something about you. Everyone else, especially women, have no say in the matter. This truth should be easy to accept when the woman that hurt you in the past is a woman you don't like. However, what if this woman who called you who knows what negative thing is a woman you're attracted to? What do you do then? The same thing. Just know they don't really mean it, or perhaps they do, but they lack the authority like I said previously, so none of what they said is valid. You will have to repeat this a little more often for the woman you find attractive though, because you just have that emotional connection with them, but do not hold yourself back from the following steps. Another thing they might try to do is always point out your mistakes. This is obviously more common with women who reside in the places you often visit, like work, school, a cafe, and so on. I'll be talking about how to deal with failure in an upcoming chapter, but as of now, just understand that mistakes are inevitable. Women especially love to point out other people's mistakes. Don't take it personal. Women also like to glorify themselves when they are right and you're not. These are just some things that women will do to rig your ability to socialize, but what you must understand is that none of it matters. Unless, of course, she is qualified to do so. There's no need to feel lonely in the world because of women. I know society likes to put women on a pedestal and praise them for their intelligence, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of smart women out there, but not all. Some women are imposters pretending to be smart, but if you look right at their core in their life, you'll realize they aren't any better than you, and as a matter of fact, they might be worse off. Yes, their social abilities give them an edge, but only on people who are ignorant, as they will believe they're bullshit. Smart people like me and you know the truth. Someone who is willing to criticize and judge, especially in the negative spectrum, better be ready to back it up with results. Some of these women don't have those results, and instead they have a track record of being lazy and manipulative in order to get what they want. Don't kid yourself. Be a man, be a boss, be free, and always question not only women, but everyone who dares to judge your character. Chapter 10. Prepare in advance to defeat depression. Not many speak about the relationship between depression and failure, but if you were to take a closer look, you will realize that failure is always the cause of depression. Think about it. It's always the one thing or series of things that go wrong for that depression to start creeping in. Usually it's due to your failure to take action that leads to depression, but sometimes it's your very failure to process the situation properly that leads to depression. Regardless, depression can definitely cause someone to feel lonely. Let's break down the two main reasons why depression occurs so that you get a better understanding of them. My definition of depression really boils down to your failure to prepare in advance. That's exactly what depression is. Nothing more, nothing less. If something goes wrong or you fail at something, it's your fault for two simple reasons. Reason number one is you knew something could go wrong and you chose to ignore it. Or number two, you chose to stay in your bubble of knowledge and didn't inform yourself about what else is out there. Either way, these two situations can lead to depression if you don't know how to tackle them properly. First of all, let me tell you that depression is inevitable. There will always be things that happen out of nowhere and there's nothing you can do about them. You can't possibly know everything or be able to predict the future accurately. Knowing this, how do you go about depression? Well, what if I told you that depression is actually a good thing? As I am writing this book, I still get depressed, and I accept it, which is really the first step to cope with depression. Don't fight it. A lot of people try their hardest to not feel depressed. Some resort to extremes, such as distractions and addictions, to numb their feelings of depression. The reason why people do this is because they are resisting instead of accepting and allowing the depression to be there. After you learn how to embrace depression, the second step is to analyze it. Ask yourself, how did I get here? Why is it that I feel depressed? If you think about it, you'll come to notice that the reason you feel depressed is due to your lack of preparation. Your mind is currently in denial of the fact that your lack of preparation is normal. Look, not preparing in anticipation happens to all of us. We can't possibly predict all of our actions 100% accurately. We can only estimate, and sometimes we can't even do that. You have to be honest with yourself and ask if you could have done something or not. Once you know, you move on to the third step, which is forgiveness. We all drop the ball at some point. We're not perfect. No matter how good we might be, a small margin of error will always be present, so accept it. Don't be angry at yourself. As humans, we prepare in accordance to the value we believe we have. If we believe we're of high value, we tend to prepare more than if we believe we're low value. The last step to get out of depression is to take action. If you were ignorant after knowing something could happen, now is the time to educate yourself to ensure it doesn't happen again. You have to do something about it even if you don't feel like it. Take small steps to repair the damage if possible, and this time prepare for another similar incident should it happen again in the future. However, let's say you had no control over it. In this case, all you can really control is the way you process the situation. This is where your failure of preparation comes in. There's things like death, you see. We know it's going to happen to a person close to us one day or another, so it is our job as of right now to prepare for when the day comes. What are you going to do and how are you going to manage your feelings? Think of preparation as a vaccine for depression. As long as you're prepared, the struggle can come your way and you'll be ready to handle it. Like I said though, you can't prepare for everything. And for those instances, take the depression as a signal that you should prepare from now on because you never know when this might happen again. So there you have it, a proper and comprehensive guide to dealing with depression. Remember that it's going to happen no matter what. The best thing you can do is prepare yourself by either knowing what to do when this specific struggle comes by or learning this process of approaching depression by memory. Don't let depression consume you and keep you in loneliness. Depression is more than a good thing. It's an instructor of life. Learn from it and grow from it. Chapter 11. Forgive yourself, but never forget. Let's face it, we've all done things in the past that we're regretful about and we could only wish to erase. I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there. There's nights when you can't go to sleep because your mind reminds you of such things that eventually fill your heart with guilt. This isn't anything to be ashamed about. Most people go through this in one way or another, even those who say they have nothing to be regretful about. Feeling guilty about something you've done in the past can drive you to loneliness simply because you feel like you don't deserve to be out. In your mind, you would rather isolate yourself and spare others from potentially harming them or yourself. Let's break down what it means to forgive yourself first. Saying sorry to the individual you hurt or trying to forget or deny the guilt is not self-forgiveness. You see, a hard truth you're going to have to swallow is that guilt itself is good. You need to feel guilty if you did something bad because if you think about it, how else would you ever stop yourself from doing it again? If you're labeling it as bad and are feeling guilty about it, you know very well that it was not the right thing to do. That is key. Guilt itself is like a life lesson you must never forget. You should never forget the things you feel guilty about doing because they contain gems about yourself. However, that doesn't mean that you should label yourself as a bad person. Never do, no matter how bad it is. We all make mistakes and do things we will never do again, but we can only know that after the fact. Making decisions is not an easy task. It requires skill, intelligence, and wisdom. Over time, you will make better and better decisions. Don't allow yourself to be defined by only your bad decisions. Instead, embrace them, learn from them, and grow. Now that you know that you must embrace guilt, the next thing you should do is put an end to any punishment you've been doing yourself. Like I said previously, we all make bad decisions. Punishing yourself will not make things right because the damage is already done. Whatever chaos or bad deeds your actions cause are done. There's no going back. No matter what you do, most of the time you can't reverse what's already done. So just let it go. Let that punishment go. It's not serving anyone. It's not making you feel better, I'm pretty sure, and it's sure not helping the person you harm feel better. If you cause someone harm, that is. What will make things better is if you start taking positive action and start doing the right thing from now on. That action in of itself will propel you into a much better path because you're doing something about your guilt. The only way to avenge your guilt is by learning from it through action. Do the right thing this time and stop doing the wrong one. That's what really matters. The next thing you should do is express gratitude for everything that went right with the situation that makes you feel guilty. Perhaps you met someone new, maybe you made a relationship stronger, maybe you finally got yourself to stop doing something harmful. Whatever the case may be, find the positive in the situation. It's always there. You just have to do some digging to find out one thing that is good. The last thing you want to do is show some respect towards yourself. Remember all those people who you respect. Are you always looking at their downfalls? Probably not. You respect them because of their struggles, their bad decisions, and their commitment to stay strong no matter what. You're not judging them. You're accepting them as they are. That's how I want you to treat yourself, with respect. When you do this, do it from the frame of a high-value individual because that is who you are. Once you start feeling better about yourself, you'll be able to pursue self-love, which is the ultimate phase to self-forgiveness. Don't forget to read my chapter on self-love to learn how to do this properly. There you have it. Forgiving yourself is hard, I know. But that doesn't mean you should lock yourself in loneliness and feel like you're not good enough to interact with the world. Everybody deserves a second, third, fourth, etc. chance to be out there and express themselves, no matter what you did in the past. Remember, we're not perfect. In the end, we all make bad decisions that lead us to do something we will regret later, but that is part of life. Life wouldn't be as valuable if we didn't have this polarity of good and bad decisions. Chapter 12. Control your perception of trauma. Just to get it over with, if you're going through some traumatic experience right now, it is totally acceptable that you find yourself in a lonely place. There's no need to force yourself out of that state, at least not yet. I've mentioned throughout the book plenty of times the idea of embracing that which may seem harsh and painful. The same principle applies to this circumstance. If you want to overcome your trauma in order to exit this place of loneliness, you have to embrace your trauma. Stop resisting the fact it happened and that you're not traumatized by it. Bad things happen to people all the time. You're not alone in this, even though you may think you are. Most people think that trauma happens right after a very bad or nasty experience, but that is wrong. Trauma occurs when something bad happens, yes, but also, you don't have the right emotional control and intelligence to process the bad situation accurately. You literally had no idea how to respond to the situation, so your emotions and your brain did everything they could, but in the end, you pretty much lost all control. The key factor to notice here is your loss of control. Like I said, we all go through bad things in life, but they don't all cause trauma. The reason is because these things aren't that bad to the degree that we lose full control. We may lose partial control, but not all of it, which then allows us to fix the issue with the little bit of control we have left. Fair enough, right? We're not all equipped to handle every situation with class. Now get ready, because here's the big twist. The control we believe to have is not always accurate. Even though it feels like we know for sure how much control we have, the truth is we actually don't know for certain. Something to know about trauma is that even if you feel like you have no control, the reality is you always have some control left. That control goes by the name of perception. This perception of yours can control the way you see and interpret the situation, which is far more valuable than you think. Perception is ultimately all that matters because it is what gives the world the meaning we have for it. If you want proof of this, go and share something that's a big deal for you to someone else and watch as they don't care about it as much as you do. Why do you think that is? They have a different perception on the matter. Now that you've learned about perception, it's time you go back to that trauma and face it head on. In order to do this effectively though, you need to gather new perceptions of the situation. You do this by doing your research. Depending on what the traumatic experience is, do your research on how to see the situation in a positive light and as a strength moving forward. Once you've done that, remember that you're not done yet. A lot of people get stuck here because they think that just by hearing someone talk positive is going to relieve their trauma. This is not true for anything in life. The next step in the trauma embracing process is to take action. You need to take action that triggers that trauma. Of course, you don't have to take massive action, but certainly do take small steps towards your trauma relief. During this phase, you also want to ramp up your self-esteem. Do things that you love and that you're also proficient at. This could be a hobby or anything really that's going to guarantee you some small wins. You don't just want to be taking steps towards trauma relief solely. You want to mix it up in order to establish what I call foundational confidence. This confidence is what's going to speed up the process once you've taken those baby steps, but it will take time because trauma, like we said previously, can be very emotionally draining. However, trauma can be pretty detrimental to your life, so it could set you back for years if you don't resolve it now. If it means a lot for you to overcome this trauma and not feel lonely by it, you have to be brave enough to take these steps. Yes, it will be painful, but pain is inevitable no matter what. If you let the trauma control your life, you will feel pain every time this trauma stops you from doing something. Sure, you can get used to that pain, but at the expense of lowering your self-esteem and your value as a person overall. You also have the other option of fixing this now, and yes, the pain will be much greater, but it's only short-term because the trauma relief is near, and once you attain it, you will be unstoppable. You will become trauma-proof because once you're able to face a trauma once, falling into trauma again isn't as easy anymore. And whatever is trying to hurt you out there will have to try harder this time. Chapter 13. The importance of having an inspirational purpose. Laziness is the biggest obstacle between you and loneliness, period. Want to know why? Because if you're lazy and don't take action, then nothing happens. Everything in this book is possible, but if you're not willing to take action and grind it out even on the days you don't feel like it, then you will fail at stepping out of your loneliness. I am serious about this. If this means a lot for you, you need to leave laziness behind you for good. With that out of the way, if you're still reading, I'm going to assume you're ready to annihilate laziness for good, so let me show you how to do just that. First of all, let's discuss where laziness comes from. In simple terms, laziness comes from a lack of not just a purpose, but an inspiring purpose. It's not enough to hear me say these great things wait for you once you step out of your loneliness. You also need to have your own inspirational purpose. That inspirational purpose should give you the chills, it should get your heart racing, and it should put a sense of accomplishment in your soul. If you're not feeling those things, then your purpose just isn't well-rounded and you need to work on it more. In order to find an inspirational purpose, it's very important that you get out there and try things. Anything that catches your attention, get out there, try it for yourself, and always give it your best. Don't just scratch the surface of these things. Get out there and actually put in the work and avoid being lazy with these things. Once you find a purpose that has the inspirational characteristics we spoke about previously, commit to it long term. Now, given that this book is about stepping out of your loneliness and becoming more social, try to choose an inspirational purpose that's around those lines. Now, to break down laziness, laziness is the default state your body goes into if it lacks an inspirational purpose. This is normal as your body always needs something to do. Even when you're lazy, you're still doing something. The difference between lazy activities and purpose-driven activities is that one runs on a system while the other one doesn't. Lazy activity is random without a specific end goal in mind. Yes, you may learn a lot from lazy activities, don't get me wrong, but in the end they lead nowhere. That is the problem. If your daily actions aren't taking you anywhere, you will go nowhere. Another problem we face with lazy activities is that they're all different, so they keep us from getting bored. Yes, this is a fact. You won't feel bored when you're doing lazy stuff, but here's the problem. If your purpose is to not feel bored, then that is all you will get. My inspirational purpose with this book is to see you get out there, be social, be part of society, and be your best self. Laziness is the equivalent of you gambling that inspirational purpose and hoping for the best. I say no to that, and I hope you do too. Now that you know why laziness and lazy activity are inefficient, let's learn how to capitalize on an inspirational purpose once you found it. The first thing you have to realize about an inspirational purpose is that for the most part, it will be hard and sometimes boring. Yes, there will be things along the way that are painful, boring, hard, complicated, and so on and so forth. The temptation to quit will be present at all times, no matter how inspiring your purpose is. That is a fact. The reason why the journey will be hard and boring is because you're ultimately postponing present pleasure and gratification to have a substantial amount of it later when you do accomplish that inspirational purpose. That feeling of accomplishing an inspirational purpose is a feeling that most people won't feel because they can't postpone the pleasure and gratification. Everyone wants to feel good right now. The one thing you must have in order to accomplish your inspirational purpose is focus. Believe me, there will be people and distractions that will try to take you off course in order for you to take some pleasure now and not later. Whatever the case might be, you have to resist and think back to that inspirational purpose. On top of that, you must plan ahead. Write down the goals you need to achieve and discipline yourself to accomplish them. Discipline is about having emotional intelligence. Your ability to control your emotions and tell yourself that you must keep going no matter how hard and how painful it gets is how discipline is formed. It's not easy, but it's very necessary to ensure your accomplishment of that inspirational purpose. The last thing you will need is willpower. Willpower is obtained through small gains over a period of time. This is why it's so important to have small goals, because they are in near proximity and achievable. This is really where you should be getting your pleasure from. These small goals will give you that sense of accomplishment along the way, since your inspirational purpose will still be far from happening even if you're taking the right steps towards it. Once you've achieved a set of small goals, you will eventually build some willpower that you can use to take a big step in your journey. This is how you defeat laziness and cultivate an inspirational purpose. Remember, don't do random activities. Do systematic activities that lead to the accomplishment of an inspirational purpose. Chapter 14. Remove the toxic influence in your life. There's nothing more powerful than the influence you have around you. Now, you may be saying, I'm alone, I have no friends, I have no romantic partner, I have no family. Whatever the case may be, you still have some influence. This influence can be the news you watch, the movies and shows you see, the books you read, the places you go, the music you listen, and so on. Influence is all around us, and it's very likely that the influence you currently have right now is reinforcing the fact that being lonely is okay. The first thing I'm going to say is, drop that influence as soon as possible. Drop it all. Easier said than done, you may say, and you're right. It won't be easy removing this influence, but it's not impossible, as I will show you in a second. In order to remove this influence, you have to first identify it. I want you to take a look at all the influence you have in your life right now. How much of that influence is reinforcing the fact that being lonely is good? Look thoroughly, honestly, and rational. Don't justify anything. If it carries this sort of lonely influence, put it on the list. Once you've identified all the sources of this influence, the next thing you want to do is pick the one with the lowest influence level. Once you've selected it, the next thing I want you to do is lower your consumption of it. You don't want to drop it completely because it'll be too much to handle at first. Only lower the amount of exposure you have to that influence. At the same time, I want you to start seeking new influence. This new influence should reinforce the opposite, which is a social life. Start to consume this type of influence in small amounts. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with this influence because it'll have the opposite effect if you do so. Repeat the process until you've tackled all the lonely influence and you replaced it with the new social influence. This will be a hard process to go through, but you need to go through it in order to make the transition effective long term. If you feel like you're losing yourself and that you're changing, the truth is you are. You will not be the same person after this is done, and with good reason. You're literally going from someone who feels lonely all the time to someone who is out there and socializing under his own terms. Remember that this is for your own good and you shouldn't feel bad for removing this influence. Sometimes it will have to be people, and these probably will be the hardest, especially if you spend years with these individuals. You must cut these people unless they're willing to change and go on the same journey as you are. In that case, you can make an exception, but make sure to hold each other accountable. Like I said, it seems great at first, but later it will get hard and you run the risk of falling off. Once you have done this process, you should now have influence reaffirming that this is a good thing to have a social life and that people are good. Your next step should be to get comfortable in that new reality. By nature, this influence should start pushing you in the direction of being more social, and your desire to interact with people should increase. Here's a tip. Use this new influence as educational source material to use in your day-to-day conversations. It could be that you spend way too much time feeling lonely, that you got used to thinking a certain way and talking a certain way. Use this new influence as inspiration for new ways of talking. Believe me, you can still come up with new ways to talk on your own, but it will be much harder. Make it easy on yourself and steal some lines from your favorite newfound influence. It'll make communication that much smoother and interesting. Lastly, you may be asking yourself, do I have to quit all my old influence forever? The answer is no. You can go back to it, but only after you've quit and don't miss it anymore. That way you don't slide back to it prematurely and get addicted to it like you were in the past. My ultimate goal with this process is for you to be able to control and manage your influence depending on what your inspirational purpose is. Once you can do that, you can choose your influence as you may, because you'll understand the power of influence. Chapter 15. Compare yourself, but only when it makes sense. Comparing yourselves to others is not unique to people who feel lonely. Comparison happens to everybody, and your interpretation of it is ultimately what dictates if you'll make the most out of a comparison or become a slave to it. Comparison by definition will never go away, as it is a way to measure ourselves against other people. However, if you wish to use comparison properly, you must understand how comparison works in the first place. Comparison, like I said, is a way to evaluate how we stand when placed next to other people. This seems pretty reasonable, right? Well, actually, comparison goes a little deeper. In order to make an effective comparison, you must first make the comparison logical. For example, let's say you want to be an all-star player. Would it make sense to compare myself to someone like LeBron James, who at the time of writing this book is considered to be the best player, after I've only been playing basketball for 1 year? No. It's illogical to compare myself because he spent years playing basketball while I've only spent 1 year. The comparison is just not fair or logical for that matter. Now let's say I choose to compare myself with someone who plays in the same league I'm playing, he's the same age, plays the same position, and also has 1 year of experience. Would that be a fair comparison? Yes. That's a more logical comparison now. After you have found a comparison that actually makes sense, you need to get very clear with what you're comparing. You see, it's very easy to get sidetracked and start focusing on the things that don't matter in the comparison. For this example, it's illogical to start comparing things like his popularity, his playtime, the shoes he's wearing, when the real comparison is in the position he plays. Focus on what matters. Focus on what makes him, let's say, a better power forward than you. How is he moving? Where are his eyes going? What is he thinking? These are things that matter. When you're comparing his technique or way of doing things to yours, remember to always do it from a place of logic. This isn't about getting angry or mad because he's better. This is about learning. Understand the ultimate goal of comparison is education. You're looking to educate yourself and learn from the other individual to grow yourself. This can be hard if you're used to doing that illogical and emotional comparison. When your emotions start to get way too involved, you run the risk of throwing a good opportunity for growth away. Don't do it. That is just one example of how comparison works, but you can easily apply this to anything. In the social world, this plays out too. You may be asking yourself, do I have to like or know the person in order to compare myself to them? No. You can compare yourself to people you hate and don't know. And to be fair, these comparisons tend to be more effective because if they can trigger hatred in you, it means that there's a part inside you that knows you could do better, but you're stopping yourself from doing so. When you're comparing yourself to such a person, don't focus on his result as much. Focus on how he's getting those results. Learn. Once you learn their skills, refine them and use them to get those same results for yourself. In the end, you'll learn that there's no reason to hate the individual. Hating them is just stopping you from attaining growth yourself because you're focusing on the results they have that you don't. Always remember though, make sure your comparisons are logical. You don't want to be comparing yourself with someone who isn't at a logical level as you are. Don't get me wrong, you can still learn from these people who are beyond your scope of comparison, but only for inspiration because chances are you're still years away from becoming a logical comparison. Stop thinking that you're unworthy or undeserving of a social life just because there's already others who are doing it better than you. Get into that learning mindset and use comparison to become better instead of being a slave to it. Chapter 16. Confront people by not doing so. Ever been called weird, crazy, or different? Let me tell you that I've been called those things and much worse. I've been called creature, slave, pervert, psycho, and ugly, just to name a few. A collection of these can cause someone to adopt a negative connotation about themselves and lead them to live a life feeling lonely. I'm going to have fun roasting the people who call you these names because deep down, they're just little idiots running around lacking major understanding of human psychology. One reason people judge you in this manner is because they want to see you fall. The reasons may be many, but just understand they want to see you crumble. We're in an era where people don't like each other. As much as people say to love your neighbor and be kind to others, the reality is not everyone really wants to. On the contrary, people will be mean, nasty, and selfish towards you because of something that just happened to them in the past. This isn't a book about helping you become a better person, but just understand that people will normally behave based on their past experiences, unless of course they understand human psychology. Another reason why people call you names is because they aren't smart enough to come up with a more concrete character feedback that actually makes sense. If someone calls you weird, there is nothing you can do with that besides feel bad about yourself for being weird. The other person obviously means no good to you because if they did, they would be more specific towards their call. Calling you weird makes no sense unless of course they want to hurt you. People like these are lazy and stupid as they lack the context to articulate an appropriate delivery of how they feel about you. The third reason they will tell you these nasty things is because they lack empathy and have a huge ego. Some people just believe they are the best person in the world and that every word they say counts. Best person? More like delusional person. Sorry to break it to that person, but there is nothing special about any particular person in this world. Every person's value is determined by another human. There is no higher power that is not human saying that this person is more special than the other. People who judge without even knowing you are delusional. They really have to take a good look at themselves before opening their mouths. The fourth reason why people will call you nasty names is envy. You might be really good at a particular skill of some sort, or you just might be very popular. Either way, they envy something about you, and because they can't get it themselves, their ultimate goal is to bring you down. This is cowardice behavior from their part, which should be ignored and felt sorry for, really because of their inability to take action. The last reason someone will dare to judge in such a filthy way is they see that you're an easy target. The moment they pick on you and see that you don't do anything about it, they will take advantage of you. If this is you, it'll take some time for you to regain some confidence in yourself, but start the process so that you're able to stand up for yourself in the future. Now that you know the reasons, I want you to accept this reality. People will try to socially hurt you out there. The outside world isn't some soft pillow you jump and fall on every day. But that shouldn't stop you from getting out there and being yourself. To put it in simple terms, in order to approach all of these reasons for why you're getting called all these names, you must stand up for your beliefs and compromise when you have to. Like I said earlier in this book, you need a purpose in order to take action. Your purpose in this case should be to be unaffected by these confrontations. Your goal isn't to have them stop or beat them up. Your goal is to be able to move forward in life despite their presence. That's how you get ahead. Don't get stuck in life trying to be the best at responding and crushing these people because it's pointless and a waste of time. If people choose to be this way and call you names here and there, that is their choice. It is not your job to go against them and take them down because the truth about these type of people is, first of all, they have issues themselves, and second, even if you take one down, 3 more will take its place. It's a never-ending cycle, which is why I said, sometimes just compromise on your ability to respond by ignoring them. But definitely stand your ground when you have to. The best comeback you can give these individuals is getting results despite their talking. Don't let their chatter enclose you in loneliness. Remember that it's pointless noise like the static that goes off in the background when you're listening to a song. The song matters, the static doesn't. Chapter 17. Stay away from low-value people. Maybe you look at the news and see all these bad people causing harm and destruction. Maybe you look at your surroundings and all you see is people gossiping and talking about people behind their backs. Whatever the case may be, I'm sure you've been exposed to one of these ways people are, and that might have caused your feeling of loneliness altogether. Yes, humans are flawed and they do things that are incorrect sometimes, but that doesn't mean you should abandon human interaction altogether. You see, before I went into loneliness, I had some of the worst interactions with people. They were either boring, bland, or just plain out unnecessary. Most of my communication was forced, or it was just me trying to please someone. I did not want to talk to people because I would always end up being disappointed of them. However, after some time, it became a bit confusing because I started to question myself if it was really them or it was me. It could very well be that it's your delivery that is causing them to communicate in that icky way that you don't like. In any case, you must understand that it could be them, it could be you, or it could be the combination of both. Some people talk a lot and they like to sound like communication geniuses, but the reality is they're only good at filling up the silence with nonsense. It's the truth. Very few people actually take the time to learn about communication and its sole purpose. You see, communication should only be used to convey information. That's it. However, there's people who use communication incorrectly, such as for manipulative and other harmful purposes. These are not healthy methods of communication. Knowing this, it could very well be the other person doesn't know what they're doing with communication. If this is the case, there's nothing you can do, as you can't control their communication, but what you can do is walk away. You're already good at being on your own, so this shouldn't be a problem. What you can control, however, is your own method of communication. Definitely do your research on communication and how you can improve it, but only after you've done your best to figure it out on your own. Remember that communication is best when it's natural and it just flows. Studying way too much communication content can make your conversation sound robotic. When you study, only do it when something is not working on your communication and work at it slowly. Don't study big chunks. Study small chunks and implement right away. That is the most effective way of studying in general. There you have it. Just because you've had some bad experiences with communication, it doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue a social life. Not everyone is bad at communication and you're not meant to get along with everyone. Finding people who you like and you can relate to is pretty hard. It takes a lot of time and effort, but it is worth it because nothing replaces having someone to count on when things go south or you just need someone to exchange information with. Lastly, to those people who can appreciate your communication skills once you've attained them, take it easy, don't judge them. Not all of us get the privilege of awareness and getting to realize we're doing something wrong and we have to change it. Only brave people take the risk to change and leave their current life behind in order to pursue a better life of greatness. You're doing that and I'm proud of you. Don't cut yourself short and go after the social life you deserve, and if you face one of these people who sound like they know from where they speak from, just know that it's not enough just to open your mouth to be an excellent speaker. You need to understand communication and be able to make the most out of it by educating yourself and understanding what communication is really for. Like I said, people are flawed, and yes, they will let you down at times, but that's not all people. Our human population is enormous. Take advantage of that and start being more social today. Chapter 18. Stop living in the world of your mind when you talk. They say we live in two worlds at the same time. We live in the world of the external that we call Earth, but we also live in a world created by our mind. Believe it or not, the world that we've constructed in our mind far exceeds the worth of the external, at least when you're unaware of these two worlds. The issue that presents itself here is prioritizing that world in your mind, because when you do that, essentially you're choosing to live in loneliness because nobody else lives in your head but you. The external world, on the other hand, is where everyone else resides. The people you see every day, the plants, the trees, the animals, these all live in a world called Earth. This might sound like nonsense at first because it's pretty obvious, right? Well, not so much, because if we had to do a memory test between what you remember in your mind and what is actually out there, you'd probably fail because the majority of the time, the world in your mind is in control. So what does all this have to do with loneliness? Well, if you want to step out of that loneliness, you will have to partially step out of your mind in order to interact with people, because remember, they reside in the exterior world, not in your head. Now, before we continue, I just want to clarify that living in the world inside your mind isn't a bad thing at all. Living in the world of your mind can bring you peace, calmness, focus, and many other things. You can think of this world as your logical brain. As you read this book, you're living in your mind because you're reading and processing all this information so that it makes sense for you. Living inside your mind is amazing and beautiful, but it must only be done on certain occasions. When it comes to being social, we need to step out of that world and step into the exterior world. A word of warning. This will be scary at first. I'm not gonna lie. Stepping out of your mind will be scary. Why? Well, first of all, as a lonely person, you will find comfort in living in your mind because in that world, there is no pressure to be social. Inside your mind, you can be whatever you choose to be. In the exterior world, you can also choose to be whatever you want to be, but it comes at a cost of hard work, discipline, and purpose. Right now, you may not be as familiar with the exterior world, so this will naturally create discomfort. Another reason why this will be scary is because if you spend the majority of your time in your mind, you've most likely formed your identity and sense of self in your mind. The problem with that is that you don't have an identity for the exterior world. Don't worry, as you will learn how to create one once you begin this journey, but just acknowledge the fact that it will be scary. Don't be fearful of this. Instead, embrace it. Everything that is unknown to us eventually becomes known. Now, the first thing to note about stepping out of your mind is to take baby steps. Take small steps and interact with the exterior world little by little. You can start with nature, with the city, the buildings, and so on. Just get out there and experience Earth for what it truly is. Remove all the labels that have been imposed by people and just enjoy Earth for what it is. Eventually, of course, you're going to want to interact with people. When you start interacting with people, be sure to take it slow. You don't want to craft a complicated conversation right from the start. Things like hi, hello, how you doing today will suffice. These are simple and easy to execute. Another thing you can do is give people compliments or do nice things for people in moderation, of course. These are all small steps that'll get you to start interacting with the exterior world more than you do with the world in your mind. But remember, you're not replacing one with the other. Your ultimate goal should be to get comfortable with the exterior world enough for you to be able to switch between the two with ease. You may be asking, why can't I just interact with people and still live in my mind? Believe me, I've done that and it doesn't usually end well. Living in your mind causes conversations to be dull, boring, calibrated, and planned. You will make the other person think that you have an agenda in mind and that all you're trying to do is manipulate them or take something from them. You want to avoid this because this will create a negative social pain, which is fixable like I spoke earlier in the book, but why do it if you can avoid it right from the get-go? So there you have it. When you're out there trying to be social, you need to step out of your mind and step into the world of the living, which is Earth. Chapter 19. How anxiety wrecks your confidence and self-esteem. There are several forms of anxiety that can cause loneliness, one of them being approach anxiety. Approach anxiety is that heart-wrecking feeling you get when you're about to approach someone you don't know for the first time. This can seem scary because you have no idea what to expect. Like I've said before, humans are spontaneous. This person can either like you or by the same token dislike you. Another form is crowd anxiety. This anxiety happens when you find yourself in crowded environments. The presence of so many people in one place gives you anxiety, which pretty much gives you speech paralysis. The list goes on, but this isn't a book about anxiety, so I won't touch on all of them, but they're essentially dealt the same. If you have any form of anxiety, which I like to call social anxiety, what do? First, before we even get into dealing with the anxiety, it's important that we understand where it comes from. To put it in simple words, social anxiety comes from a lack of confidence and self-worth. When you're not feeling confident about yourself and you feel like your self-worth is low or absent for that matter, that's when you give permission for social anxiety to take over. Just by knowing this is the reason why you have social anxiety. Your social anxiety should start to decrease at a decent rate because when we experience anxiety for the first time, we usually don't even know why. We just tell ourselves that talking to people is hard, humans are complicated, and so on. I want you to understand that social anxiety has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with you. The question now becomes, how do you deal with your lack of confidence and self-worth? Well, I have some good news for you. The only one you will really have to work on is confidence because self-worth is an illusion. You see, self-worth is something that is made up. There is no chart or graph that can tell you how much self-worth you got. The amount of self-worth you have is the amount you believe you have. Confidence, on the other hand, can be built and it is measurable, so let's focus on that for now. If you're currently lonely, chances are your social skills are not that shiny and great. Your job at this time is to build what I call foundational confidence. You need to get the basics down before you start going out there and start becoming more social. The reason why you're getting anxious when you're about to approach a person is because you lack a foundational confidence to support you. If you're getting really anxious, it's most likely demanding a lot from yourself right from the start. Look, you can't expect to be an expert right from the start, and you can't expect people to smile and be receptive to you at first. The truth is, you're probably going to get rejected left and right. Remember, social pain is inevitable. So, part of defeating social anxiety is to first, embrace the social pain, and second, focus on building that foundational confidence. At first, you need some wins. You get these wins by putting yourself out there and not expecting anything from the other person. Don't expect people to smile or laugh. Accept anything and everything that comes at you from every interaction. Yes, this will be emotionally tough, which is why you have to take small steps at first. Don't go out there trying to talk to 2 to 3 people at a time or try to perform on stage. These are too complicated for a beginner. You have to build foundational confidence, and that is only done by getting comfortable with the basics. Master one-on-one conversation first. Then you can consider stepping it up and talking to more people. Now, just because you know all this, it doesn't mean that the social anxiety will be gone now, because it won't. The second step to tackling social anxiety is to take action despite it being there. This means going through your anxiety and approaching that person anyway. This feeling of anxiety is also inevitable, but it doesn't have to stop you from being social either. As you do this more, your levels of anxiety will decrease momentarily, but will rise as soon as a new social challenge is presented. You have to be willing to take action when the time comes. Chapter 20. Are you an introvert? Are you an introvert? If you love spending time by yourself and don't feel the need to talk to people in order to feel pumped, then you're most likely an introvert. Something that tends to happen to us introverts, because yes, I am an introvert, is that we get comfortable being by ourselves to the degree that we create loneliness around us. The good news, however, is that becoming social from this point on is actually easier and far more effective than you think. You see, society has led us to believe that being an extrovert is the way to go. I mean, it's extroverts after all, the ones that get praised and you see them talking everywhere without being shy or putting themselves out there. However, something you must understand is that just because extroverts are skilled in communication and delivery of their character, this does not make them more valuable in any way. This only implies that they're better in that area of their life than you are, and that's okay. We're all born with a set of natural talents that give us an advantage over the people who don't have the same talents, but it doesn't mean in any way that you can't work for that skill and even trump their talent at some point. When we're talking about extroverts here, we think they have it easy and that they will make it big in life. And to some extent, yes, they do have a higher potential than we do. The reason being, when you're able to communicate effectively, by nature you will have more help and resources to make it where you want to a lot faster. However, their downfall is that they actually need these people. Without them, they feel lost, confused, and some even depressed. It's crazy to think that since we're introverts and to some extent lonely, we understand what it's like to be in this position. This is why I've been pounding throughout the book to embrace your loneliness and be proud of it, because it's literally a skill that most people will never get to have. Being lonely allows you to find comfort in being alone with no one to rely on but yourself. Once you start to become more social, you will realize the advantage that you have over extroverts is that you don't need these people. As I've said previously, social pain is inevitable and it will happen, but you will be affected at such a low level because the worst that can happen is that you end up alone and lonely, but you're already comfortable with that, so you got nothing to worry about. People who are extroverted, on the other hand, rely on their skill set to not experience social pain, which means they have to be willing to approach a lot of people in case one leaves, they have another one to replace them with. Given this fact, extroverted people don't create deep relationships with people because they know that everyone in their circle is dispensable. Introverted people, on the other hand, have the ability, like I said previously, to pick 3 to 5 people to be their friends and build strong relationships with those people. So as you can see, if you're an introvert, you have an advantage to build stronger relationships and be more resilient to social pains. If you're an extrovert, however, and you're experiencing loneliness, getting out of there and be more social should come a bit easier to you as you have that natural talent inside already. Even then, still embrace your loneliness as it will come in handy because when you become an extrovert who is self-aware and not afraid to be lonely, you become a stronger extroverted person. Now, if you're an introvert and you feel like you lack some motivation because you're so comfortable being lonely and alone, let me tell you, this is totally understandable. I had this problem as well when I started off. The way you deal with this is that you give yourself permission to reject people. Look, just because your goal is to become more social does not mean you have to talk to everyone. There will be people who just look annoying and not approachable. This is totally normal. Just talk to the people you find friendly or the people you must talk to in order to get something from them. There's nothing wrong with talking to people just for the sake of taking some value. These are simply allies, as I've spoken before. Alright, so there you have it. Embrace your introversion. It's a gift, but also remember that your purpose should be to become your best self. In order to become your best self, you have to have a good balance between extroversion and introversion. Chapter 21. Seeking a medical professional is not necessary. If you read the majority of this book, you might have noticed I covered topics that are normally dealt with by the medical field because they are considered medical conditions. I disagree for the most part. Reason being, I dealt with every struggle I mentioned in this book and overcame every single one of them without the need of a medical professional. I don't believe you need professional help until you've tried your hardest to deal with your loneliness on your own. Only after you put in the work and you see absolutely no progress, only then should you seek this help. Don't seek this help right away, reason being, your laziness can lead you to take such an action which puts you in the frame of the victim. You want to avoid becoming the victim of your loneliness because that is a negative and pessimistic place to come from. On top of that, seeking medical professionals is not cheap. It'll cost you money to seek this help, and also, while these professionals may sound nice and helpful, remember that at the end of the day, they're operating under a business. Their business is built on dependency. This means that they will prescribe mandatory consultations for you on a set routine, and each of those consultations will cost you money. If you're in the frame of the victim, you won't even think twice before you give them your money for something you could have done yourself. I hate that the medical field charges money for their services as they are dealing with human health and survival. Services like those should be free for the sake of continuing the human race. Yes, I understand they need money in order to operate, but they should gather their money based on a more non-profit model rather than profiting from people who are struggling in life. I repeat though, if you need to seek a professional, please go to them though. Even if you don't have the money, trust me. There's knowledge out there that can help you make that money back with hard work and knowledge, but if you have this problem of loneliness and you don't deal with it, your life will take a toll, and after that, nothing else will matter. That's it for this chapter. I felt the need to write this because before I wrote this book, I was asked to acknowledge the medical field because I was talking about anxiety, depression, and so on. My response is no. I will not give them credit for their work because I've personally never used it, and none of the people I know have either. All I will say is that it's out there, and if you meet the criteria to need it, then use it. But other than that, be strong and recognize that you have what it takes to overcome loneliness on your own. Chapter 22. Happiness is all that matters. Now that you've hopefully gone through the entire book, you may be thinking, it's a lot of work. And the truth is, it is. Nothing great in life comes easy, and this is one of those things that will take time, energy, patience, and sacrifice, but I promise you, it'll be worth it. To conclude this book, I want to add an extra dose of motivation on top of your already established inspirational purpose. Right now, you may be wanting to pursue a more social life because you want a better job, you want more friends, you want a romantic partner, perhaps all of them. Whatever the case may be, it's all great, but if you think about it, all these requirements lead to one place, and that is happiness. Yes, my ultimate goal for you in this book, I said in the introduction, is to embrace being lonely and from that place pursue a social life and be your best self. This essentially means that you have a choice between being social or being lonely. In my opinion, one isn't better than the other, and both are quite necessary in order for you to get ahead in life. If you didn't notice, I pointed out the advantages of being lonely and how that could help you understand yourself deeper and make you a more resilient person all around. However, I also pointed out what you are potentially missing out if you continue being lonely without exploring the other side fully. This leads to two places. The choice of being able to decide and your ability to be your best self. You see, a lot of people preach that you should be yourself and nothing else but that. The problem with that advice is that always being yourself means never changing. That is totally wrong because change is necessary if you want to become better and if you want more out of life. Don't let your ego get the best out of you either. Your ego is very likely to tell you that this change is unnecessary and that you're better off just staying the way you are. Don't listen to your ego as it doesn't have the best intentions for you in the long run. You see, the ego is only interested in temporary relief. That means that it'll always be seeking for things that'll make you feel good and make you look good. Yes, you will look and feel like a chump at first for not being able to communicate effectively at first, but hey, it's how everyone starts. Only naturals who are naturally born with the skill of communication start off great. Believe me, there's not a lot of people out there who went through loneliness and now are talking to everyone. There's so many people with potential out there, but most of them are currently hiding in their bubble because of everything I explained in this book. It's totally understandable, as I've said in this book, it's not easy. Change comes at a price. You will have to change a lot in order to achieve the social life you want, but it's not impossible. I want to reiterate that the reason why I wrote this book and not just suggested places where you can go find this information is because I couldn't find this information out there, or at least not offered directly to you. Most personal development content and communication skills are taught for people who are already out there and want to get better. I know from personal experience that when I started, I had nobody. I was truly lonely with no one to rely on. I only had myself, but I was motivated and I had an inspirational purpose like I explained earlier in the book. I did whatever it took to compile the information needed to get ahead even though I was in a bad situation. It took me a long time though because the information was scrambled, so I had to go in and figure it all out on my own. Years later, I was finally able to put together the core things that actually matter in order to go from lonely individual to a more social and charismatic person. Finally, I want to say that at the end of the day, all that matters is your happiness. This book isn't to downgrade being lonely or being social. They're both great in my opinion and you can learn from both. In the end, you want to make sure they both work in your favor so that you become your best self. Thank you very much for reading. The best thing you can do for me right now is go out there and be the hero of your own life.